Hi, I'm Abby Gray, and this is my Prompt 1 video. I have chosen two standards for Prompt 1. The science standard is obtain, evaluate, and communicate information to compare and contrast the parts of plant and animal cells, and specifically to develop a model to identify and label parts of a plant cell, membrane, wall, cytoplasm, nucleus, and the chloroplast, and an animal cell, membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. The English Language Arts Standard is draw on information from multiple print or digital sources, demonstrating the ability to locate an answer to a question quickly or to solve a problem efficiently. For the student learning goals, I unpacked the standards and created I can statements. I use an I can learning goal in each lesson. They help the students to understand the point of the lesson, along with what they should know by the end of the activity. The student learning goals I have identified are I can determine the similarities and differences between plant and animal cells. I can construct a model of a plant cell that identifies the membrane, cell wall, cytoplasm, nucleus, and chloroplasts. I can construct a model of an animal cell that identifies the membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. And I can utilize digital resources to locate information on the similarities and differences between plant and animal cells. While planning my instruction, I unpack the standards that are involved. The reason for this is to create learning goals for students, but also to find out what background knowledge I would need to have as the teacher. For this lesson, the teacher's background knowledge is pretty straightforward. Here are examples of the background knowledge needed for these standards. The teacher should know the similarities and differences between a plant and animal cell. The teacher should know the parts of a plant cell and the parts of an animal cell. The teacher should know the digital resources that the students can utilize and how to utilize them. And the teacher should find a trade book to utilize for a read aloud. Moving on to differentiation. Differentiation is defined as matching the required curriculum with the learning styles, expression styles, and abilities of students. This definition comes from the article, The 5 Dimensions of Differentiation by Reese and Renzulli. In short, differentiation is personalizing instruction in a way that students need. Students do not all learn the same. When we build relationships and use data, we can find out how our students learn best. Differentiation in the classroom is the deciding factor whether students will achieve academically or not. When students' needs are met, this is when learning happens. The pedagogical content knowledge, or PCK, refers to combining knowledge on content areas with specific teaching strategies that are most effective in teaching that subject. In order to use PCK successfully, you need to understand the content and how the content would be best delivered. In the article, Pedagogical Content Knowledge, Teachers' Integration of Subject Matter, Pedagogy, Students, and Learning Environments, Cochrane describes PCK as a type of knowledge that is unique to teachers and is based on the manner in which teachers relate their pedagogical knowledge, what they know about teaching, to their subject matter knowledge, what they know about what they teach. When teachers can accurately use PCK in the classroom, children are sure to benefit academically. Regarding classroom instruction, what would differentiation look like based on PCK? I demonstrate PCK in my classroom by incorporating an abundance of visuals. Because I teach ELA and science, visuals tend to help all students, but especially my English language learners and my students who receive special education support. Children learn best when they can conceptualize the concept and they have something to anchor to when listening and participating in instruction. A great thing about visuals is that they can be scaffolded in a way that meets the needs of all learners. For example, visuals could look different for struggling learners versus above-level learners. One group would need visuals to help remediate, while others could utilize visuals for enrichment. Visuals could include charts, diagrams, and pictures, which help make complex ideas more accessible to students. The first instructional approach I have chosen is hands-on learning. Hands-on learning is an approach to instruction where students learn through the use of active participation and engagement. Hands-on learning has also been described as experiential learning. In the article, Kinesthetic Learning, Hands-on Learning and Active Engagement, Ola Delix described experiential learning, or hands-on learning, as an educational approach that emphasizes participation and physical engagement to enhance understanding and retention. There are many reasons to implement hands-on learning, but one reason would be that hands-on learning brings engagement. In the article, Virtual versus Real, an argument for maintaining diversity in the learning environment, Franklin and Peet state, it is assumed that working in a hands-on way provides a more realistic and exciting experience of the content. Without student engagement, academic success is hard to achieve. By observing my classes from the last 5 years, it is clear that engaging these students who have grown up in the technology era is a challenge. Therefore, hands-on learning can be a helpful tool for keeping students engaged to ensure student achievement. For all students to be successful, hands-on learning has to look different for each child. For example, for gifted learners, hands-on learning needs to be paired with a higher level thinking activity that makes them critically think while using their hands. For SPED learners, hands-on learning may look different due to disabilities, sensory problems, or behavior. For example, if there are students with autism or other disabilities present in the activity, sensory-related issues may need to be addressed. Teacher-led stations could help in this instance. For our ESOL learners, this could look like pairing visuals with the activity. Differentiation would need to happen to ensure that all students would be able to participate. However, it might look different for each student. To monitor student learning during hands-on learning, I utilize a checklist. While students are doing a hands-on learning activity, I circulate throughout the room and listen to the discussions. The on-task and accurate discussion paired with the activity success will earn the students a check mark, signaling to me that they are close to mastery or have mastered. The checklist would be looking for specific vocabulary words or following the correct steps and instructions, accuracy, and more. Accurate discussions would be with student discussing the activity and content without misconceptions. If a student or group is showing a misconception, this would be reflected on the checklist to ensure that it is addressed. To manage behaviors, I would ensure that students are aware of the expectations and offer time for questions in the beginning so that all students are aware of the instructions and expectations before we started. Hands-on learning requires student accountability. This would be addressed with the students before each activity. The first piece of evidence is a picture of an edible cell. This completed edible cell represents hands-on learning because of the group engagement that was needed to happen. 5 students were in a group and were collaborating on how to create the edible cell. For group work to be successful, engagement needs to be strong. Students were highly engaged in this hands-on activity. I heard students say they had fun creating something with their hands and they enjoyed getting messy. The second piece of evidence is a picture of my students collaborating in a group. This is evidence of hands-on learning due to tangible items increasing their engagement. Their task was to research the parts of the cell and the functions, and then join in with a group and discuss those parts and functions they found. The parts were written on the whiteboard and then shared with the class to determine if everyone found the same parts and had a clear idea of those functions. This activity had high engagement through the use of whiteboards and group work. This lesson would not have been as productive had it been given as a lecture. Hands-on learning is beneficial for all students. When students learn with their hands, they can retain the information better. Tangible items are great for observation, along with trial and error. For example, when students were making an edible cell, they were able to observe the shapes of the different parts of the cell and hold them in their hands and touch them, and this helped them to decide whether that shape was a good fit or not. However, hands-on learning can be hard to fit into tight schedules. These activities can be time-intensive due to setup, participation, and cleanup. They could also involve frequent transitions, which can extend the time as well. Resources are also needed for some hands-on activities. My Title I school does not have the resources available for the activities that I'd like to incorporate. This results in me spending money or asking families to donate. For above-level learners, hands-on learning activities encourage critical thinking. When differentiated correctly, above-level learners can participate in experiences and use real-world applications in the classroom. Hands-on learning is great for struggling learners because of the participatory aspect. Often, struggling learners need differentiated learning, and hands-on learning can be easily differentiated. Also, when students are in groups for hands-on learning, I can focus more on certain groups of learners if needed. My second instructional approach surrounds the multiple intelligences theory. Howard Gardner introduced the multiple intelligence theory. Students learned through different learning styles, and Gardner believed that there are 8 intelligences. In the article, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences, Aiden states, the multiple intelligence theory ensures the development of consciousness in line with the learning processes of students, individualizes the learning process for every student, and provides for active learning. Using multiple intelligences addresses diverse learning styles. When implemented correctly, students who are taught in their preferred category of multiple intelligence can stay engaged, understand the content, and achieve academically. In the article, Teaching Strategies Based on Multiple Intelligences Theory, Suleiman and others state, multiple intelligences theory provides a platform and guidance to teachers to use integrated strategies and instructional activities to cater to the different needs of students in terms of intelligence profiles, learning styles, and learning preferences. Due to the multiple intelligence theory being based on differentiation, if implemented correctly, students at all academic levels would have the opportunity to be successful. The caveat to this would be that educators would need to take the time to learn multiple intelligences of each student in their class and then group them accordingly. Once grouped, the educator would be able to prepare lessons for the preferred learning style for each child, which would have the outcome of student success. Students are successful when we can give them individualized instruction. To monitor student learning, I would pair observation with self-assessment. I would be able to observe the children learning or not learning through their preferred learning style. After observing, I would give a quick self-assessment after an activity. This could look like raising a hand with a certain number of fingers up to explain how the student felt they learned. This could also look like a quick self-assessment checklist on a sheet of paper. The questions could consist of, on a scale from 1 to 5, how well did I understand this activity? Or, on a scale from 1 to 5, how engaged was I during this activity? Some open-ended questions could sound like, do you feel you were successful during this activity? Why or why not? And managing behaviors in this approach would look like ensuring that students are aware of the expectations and for the teacher to be visible to all students. This means that I would be available as a tool for all students throughout the activity. Also, a well thought out and detailed lesson plan is the best classroom management. This ensures that there are no parts of the activity or lesson that are unstructured. The first picture shows students who were grouped into a naturalistic intelligence. These students found that they learned best when they were able to observe the natural world. They are looking at a leaf under the microscope and observing the plant cell. Because this activity was in their preferred learning style, the students were highly engaged and eager to learn. The students were able to show achievement when asked how to describe the plant cell and to try and find the different parts of the cell. The second picture is a screenshot from a student's Chromebook. This assignment was for my gifted learners. These students were grouped according to their learning preference for spatial intelligence. Students who excel in spatial intelligence activities can think and visualize spaces and diagrams. Because these students were gifted, I allowed them to research all parts of the cell rather than the specific parts that are listed in the standard. This challenged my gifted learners and allowed them to look at the cell as a whole. Both diagrams were labeled accurately, which signaled to me student achievement. Using multiple intelligences in the classroom is a strength due to the student achievement that can come from it. For this specific unit, plant and animal cells, the content is heavy and it is beneficial for the students to get multiple avenues of instruction. Multiple intelligences is a great tool to use in the classroom, and in an idealistic classroom, all multiple intelligences would be utilized for each student. However, this is unfortunately not realistic. There will always be students who are not getting their preferred learning style met at all times. Teachers hardly have enough time in the day, and differentiation does take intentionality. However, if teachers are aware of the different multiple intelligence categories in their classroom, they would be able to create lessons and activities surrounding them. The second assignment was used for my gifted learners for enrichment. They were showing mastery from early on in the unit. Therefore, I needed to find an engaging activity that would benefit my spatial intelligence learners. These students, a group of 4, worked together to research the cell and learn all parts of both animal and plant cells. Utilizing multiple intelligences for struggling learners can produce strong academic achievement. For the microscope activity, the students who are pictured are in a small group with me. These students are benefiting from the naturalistic intelligence activity, but also benefit from the linguistic verbal support coming from me. A read aloud is an instructional strategy where the teacher reads a story aloud to the students. A read aloud is meant to be engaging for all students, which means that the execution of the read aloud needs to be intentionally planned. In the article, Revisiting Read Aloud, Instructional Strategies that Encourage Students' Engagement with Text, Morrison and others state, a read aloud is an instructional practice where teachers, parents, and caregivers read text aloud to children. The reader incorporates variations in pitch, tone, pace, volume, pauses, eye contact, questions, and comments to produce a fluent and enjoyable delivery. Utilizing the read aloud instructional approach is a way to easily integrate across content areas. For example, reading aloud a trade book for a science lesson ensures that science content is being delivered along with strengthening the listening and speaking skills of students. Also, when students are read aloud to, the educator can make the experience fun and engaging to ensure that students are listening and retaining the information that is being shared. Morrison and others state, reading aloud to children builds and supports their listening and speaking abilities and enhances their overall language. A read aloud is great for most students. However, some students are not able to stay engaged for long periods. One way to prepare for all students to be successful would be to intentionally plan for an interactive read aloud. This is where educators engage with the students during the read aloud to support comprehension. It can look like questions being asked, predictions being made, or even turning and talking throughout the story. This can help all learners to stay engaged and be successful throughout the lesson. To monitor student learning, I would have frequent monitoring breaks during the read aloud. For example, when we reach the climax of the book, I would have the students turn and talk to predict what might happen next. Another way to monitor student learning would be to frequently ask questions and have multiple students respond. To manage behaviors, we would discuss read aloud expectations before. Also, I would ensure the read aloud does not last longer than 10 minutes. This ensures that we stay engaged and there is no time for students to begin misbehaving due to lack of engagement. The first picture shows my whole group class participating in an interactive read aloud. The students were listening to me read the story, and they were observing and noticing the parts of a cell. This was in the introductory lesson of the unit. Therefore, students were curious about what they did not know yet. The second picture is of students reading aloud to each other. I often have students partner read. This allows them to work on listening and speaking skills. If they are not the ones reading, they have to listen so they can recall at the end. If they are reading, they are working on their fluency in speaking. One strength of Read Aloud is that students can continue to cultivate their love for learning while also developing their listening and speaking skills. Read Alouds are a great strategy to use when time is limited, but you want to maximize instructional time, so it's grateful to have a quick Read Aloud nearby. A weakness, however, is that students who struggle with focus and attention issues could potentially not benefit from Read Alouds. However, making them interactive with frequent questions and discussion could help. I use my above-level learners to do peer reading with my lower-level learners. This is beneficial for both groups for many reasons. One reason is that it increases comprehension. When my above learners are reading to my lower learners, they are taking on the role of the teacher and are having to explain concepts and reading strategies. Read-alouds are a great tool for struggling learners because of the differentiation that can happen with the levels of books being read. Mentor books could be read aloud to promote higher-level thinking for struggling learners, but also there is purpose in using on-level books to continue to promote intrinsic motivation to read. Mentor texts are also good to use because they can expose the students to rich vocabulary and complex sentence structures, while on-level books are good for promoting confidence and motivation. Here is my works cited page for all of the articles that I used in this presentation, and thank you for listening.